Hello guys, so today we are going to set up a Citrix ADC on the Azure cloud. So we'll be making use of a Express Edition license where we don't need to have configured any license as we will be using a trial version. So now what IP addresses we'll be using? So we'll be using three IP addresses. So first of all, we require NSIP. So my NSNIP will be 10.0.0.50. SNIP, subnet IP, I'll be using 10.0.0.60. So these will be my two IP addresses which will I'll be using, and I'll be using a VIP which will be 10.0.0.70. So I'll be triggering these three IP addresses. These three IP addresses I'll be triggering. So we will go to marketplace. We will search here Citrix ADC. We'll hit enter. So it is going to search for Citrix ADC on the Azure cloud. And we have our Netscaler VPX 14.1. We will select create and we will select bring your own license. Here I'm going to create a new resource group. Let's say demo resource group. I'm going to give the node name as Netscaler ADC -01. I'll be deploying in central India. We'll be deploying in central India, and availability options I'm not going to select any infra redundancy, whereas security type I'm going to keep as standard. And the size I'm going to keep as two virtual CPUs, 4 gigs of RAM. And I'll be making use of password. So the username I'm going to assign as VPX admin, and I'll be assigning the password. Let me reconfirm the password. Okay, my passwords don't match. Let me revalidate them. And I have be selecting the size as two virtual CPUs, 4 GB of RAM. We will keep all the three ports enabled. We'll move to disk. Here I am going to give OS disk type as standard SSD. I don't need an additional data disk, so I'll exclude it. We'll move to next networking. So it is going to create a virtual network in the name of NSADC 01-VNet, or we can create our own new subnet. So I'll be giving the name as NSVNet, and we'll be having this address range. The subnet I'll be using as subnet A, and okay. So we'll be using NSVNet subnet A, and it will have a public IP address on my Netscaler 1. I'm going to select delete public IP and NIC when VM is deleted. We will move next. We don't need load balancing at present on the Azure level. We'll move to management. Here I'm going to define the shutdown timing. I am enabling auto shutdown. So I'm going to select the India time zone, which is plus 5:30. And I'm going to say shut down my machine at 7 p.m. I'll be getting a hit on this email before the shutdown gets triggered. And we'll click on review plus create. And my validations are successfully passed. We can see the green tab at the top. Still it is populating the things. We'll wait for a moment. And it is done. So we will just click on create. and my instance is getting deployed. Meanwhile, what I'm going to do, I'm going to deploy another instance parallelly, and on another instance, I'll be making use of NSIP as 10.0.0.51, whereas my SNIP will be 10.0.0.60, and WIP will be a 10.0.0.71. Right, so my WIP will be 71 if I want to configure here. So these will be in HA mode, so I don't need to configure WIP and SNIP on the second instance. Apparently, I'll be configuring two instances of my web servers. So my web server 1, which will be having IP address 10.90, and web server 02 will have an IP address of 10.91. So I'm going to deploy these two web servers. So meanwhile, I'll go to virtual machines and I'll go and create the web servers. So I'll be selecting my resource group as demo RG. I'll say this is my WebSRV01 machine, Central India, no availability redundancy required. I'm going with standard security. Image, I'm going to select Windows Server 2019 Data Center Edition, and I'll go with two virtual CPU and 4 gigs of RAM. Whereas I'm going to give the username as SPAdmin and the password. I'm keeping my RDP, HTTPS, and HTTP ports open. We'll move to disk. So I'm going to make use of standard SSD, and I don't need additional hard disk for data. We'll exclude it. We'll go to networking, and we have already created a virtual network in the name of NSVNet with a subnet A. I'm going to use that, and I'm going to select the option delete public IP and NIC when VM is deleted. We'll go to management part, and here also I'm going to select shut down the machine when at 7 p.m. as per India time, and I'm going to select manual updates and I'll click review plus create. So I'm not going to configure any web server role or services. So I'll be installing web server role. It will be a default web service role. I'm not going to create any web page, etc. We have already seen how to create a web page and all that. So I'm just showing how we can bring the services up in the Netscaler. So meanwhile, this deployment of Netscaler instance is also in place, and the virtual machine instance deployment is also in place. I'm going to launch another phase of an Azure portal, and I'm going to create a third machine which will be web server 2. So we can shorten the duration and we have the services up and running. So my web server 01 is there. I'm going to hit create to create a new machine. We'll go with demo resource group. I'll be giving web server 02, no redundancy, standard security, Windows Server 2019 machine. Rest all things seem good. I'll assign the credential, and we'll keep the HTTP, HTTPS, and RDP port open. Next, disk, we'll hit standard SSD. Next, so again we have NSVNet, our interface, right? And ports open, we'll select delete public IP and NIC when VM is deleted. Again, on the management part, I am going to select auto shutdown as per the IST time zone, and we'll click review press create. So we'll click create this machine. Now my this instance is already deployed. We'll go back, we'll go to marketplace, and we'll deploy the second instance of the Netscaler. My first instance is already getting deployed NS ADC-01. So I'm going to again search for Citrix ADC. So we have the Netscaler VPX 14.1. I'm going to select bring your own license option, and we'll give the resource group name I am assigning NSADC02, and we'll say no redundancy. Right, we will select the image size, two virtual CPUs and 4 gigs of RAM, and I'm going to select the password option. So my username will be vpxadmin. Some password errors, we'll rectify it. So it is done. We'll again open the ports here because we want to access the Netscaler instance. We'll move to disk. We'll again select the standard SSD. Next, and we have NSVNet and all that looks good. We'll select delete public IP and NIC when VM is deleted, and we'll again go to the shutdown options as per the Indian time zone, and we'll hit review plus create. So my second ADC instance is being created. My second web server is already deployed. Now meanwhile our both ADCs are getting deployed. My first ADC got deployed, right? So my second ADC gets deployed. What we will do, we'll go to the virtual machine section, and we'll be installing the web server role on web server 1 and web server 2. So before that, I'm going to power off the machines, these three machines, because we want to, or let's wait first. Let's wait for the Netscaler instance to get completed for with the deployment. The first instance is already deployed. We'll wait for the completion of the second instance of deployment. So my things are almost completed. We can see now. Still, we'll wait. This deployment is in progress. Okay, meanwhile, let this installation go in progress. What I'm going to do, we'll go and power off this three VMs because we want to assign the IP addresses. We'll stop it. We'll say yes. Now here we are going to see how we can configure the IP addresses, the custom IP addresses which we want to configure, So let's have patience and we'll see what we want to do. So first let my machines get powered off. Okay, my third instance deployment is in progress and my machines got powered off. We'll refresh it and we can see stop and deallocate it. So I'm going to web server 1. We'll go to networking. As we have seen all these steps, we'll go to network settings, and here I'm going to select the custom IP address, so the IP address which we want to assign. So this is my IP address 10.90, and we'll select IP config. So I'm having 10.1 subnet, so we'll be using 10.1. So let's make it static, and I'm going to copy the IP address for web server and we'll paste it. We'll say save. Now at present, I'm not configuring my custom DNS. You can configure, as we have seen, we can configure a custom DNS because I have not deployed my domain controller. I'm going without the steps of a domain controller. Right, so I have configured the static IP address and I'm not configuring any custom DNS. But in production, we'll be configuring custom DNS also. So now I'm navigating to server 2, web server 2. I'll select the network settings, IPv4. I'll select IP config and we are going to assign this IP address. We will say static and we'll assign the IP address. We'll click on save. Now it is configured properly. Now we'll go to ADC1. On ADC1 again we will navigate to our network settings. Now here I'm having IP config 1. So this will be used by my SNIP. So I'm going to assign SNIP as 10.1.0.50. So I'll select static and I'm going to paste or use this IP address. Now, the most important step here is involved. We want to use these two IP addresses also, SNIP and VIP. So what we'll be doing, we'll be adding an interface here. We'll click on add and we'll give the name as ipconfig2, and we will give the IP address of SNIP as 60 static 60, and we'll click add. Here we don't need to associate the public IP address. Don't associate the public IP address on your SNIP. And the third IP address which we want to assign is 10.70. Now it will have a public IP address. So we'll click on add. We will say ipconfig 3 static IP address. We'll give the public IP address, associate public IP address, and we'll click add. Now, when you will be configuring high availability on Netscaler, so on the ADC instance 2 also, you will be using these two same IP addresses. You'll be using on the ADC 2 also 10.1.0.70 as the VIP virtual IP address or virtual server IP address, and SNIP will also be 10.1.0.60. On Netscaler, maybe we will not be doing the configuration, but on the Azure part, we need to do this configuration. And your another Netscaler will have an SIP that will be a different IP. So now here I have assigned the configuration. Now I'm navigating to my three machines. I'm triggering the start. Yes. So first I'll be navigating to my both web servers. I'll be installing the web server role so my web services are up and ready. And it is triggering power on. We'll wait for a moment and it is done. So I'll just refresh it and let us connect to the first web server. I'll click on connect and we'll provide the credentials. Now at present, if I take this public IP address and if we navigate to the browser, hit enter, nothing is getting launched because web service role is not installed. Though my port is open, my HTTP port is open, but nothing is getting resolved. So now I'm going to install the web server role. We will go with the default web services as we want to check that our load balancing option is getting up or not in the Netscaler. So I'll uncheck this. We'll go to local server and I'm going to command prompt and we'll say IP config. So you can see I'm having 10.90 with 10.1 as the subnet mask. So we'll go to dashboard. Let's let the services get populated. The blue strip is running at the top. You can see that. Now we'll select add roles and features. We will move next, next, next. We'll select the web server role. We'll say add required features. Next, 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 and install. Pretty simple. Now you can create the index.html page and you can keep in the www root folder, which will be available when we browse the web service. So at present, I am not going to create the web page. I am going to default browse the default page which we have of the IIS. Meanwhile, this is getting installed. We'll minimize it. We'll copy the another IP address. We'll try to launch this also. So it is not having anything launched. I'm going to launch another RDP instance. We'll connect to this machine also. I'll give the credentials. Okay, some typo error. And now it is working fine. Let's log into the machine and it is in the process. Let it log in. Meanwhile, we'll go to the first machine. Here IIS is getting installed. Let this go on. Meanwhile, let's come back to the second machine. Now server manager will get launched. Meanwhile, we will go and validate the IP address. What IP address we have? IP config. So we can see we have the 91 IP address 10.1.0.91. That is my private IP address. Apart from that, we have the public IP address also. So on my server 1, IIS installation completed. We'll close it and we'll minimize it. We'll go to the first tab. We'll try to refresh it. Let's once check whether the ports are open or not. So we'll go to network settings, and here we have HTTP port open, but still it is not browsing. Okay, let me try to launch the local host. And we have the IS page up and running. Maybe I need to relaunch it. Let me copy the public IP address, and it is working fine. Now we'll close this server 1. We don't require it. We'll go to server 2. We'll install the web server role here also. We'll select web server, add required features, next, 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 and install. So we'll wait for a moment. So my IS is getting installed. Meanwhile, we will close this and we'll go to our ADC1, and we are going to browse that ADC. I'm going to select the public IP address. We'll hit with HTTP, and we have the credentials. So we will log in with VPX admin and the username. So we will wait for a moment. Meanwhile, we'll check on the server too. So here IS installation is completed. We'll launch the browser and we'll browse the local website. So it's working completely fine. So I don't need this. Meanwhile, we'll go here and browse it, and it is working fine here. So now here we can see we have the NSIP and we want to configure the subnet IP. So I'm having my subnet IP, that is 10.60. I'm going to select 10.60. We'll assign the subnet IP, and it is done. And on the DNS, I am not going to assign any DNS, but I will surely select this as plus 530, the Indian time zone, because I am configuring in India. So we need to select Asia Kolkata. We'll say no, we'll go once, and I'm going to uncheck enable Netscaler advisory. And licenses is configured. We'll click on continue. Now we'll click on save. We are going to save the things, and I'm going to reboot it once. I'll be performing a soft reboot itself. So we'll go to settings, sorry, system and reboot, warm reboot. We'll click OK and let it get rebooted. So it is almost rebooted. We'll wait for a moment. We'll be having our Netscaler login page soon, and we have the login page. Let's log in. So we'll go to traffic management. We'll so first we'll go to system. We'll go to settings, and we are going to enable these services: content switching, rewrite, Netscaler gateway, authentication, etc. And advanced features also will go. Will enable GSLB. Will enable content inspection, routing, cache redirection. Sorry, web logging. We'll enable web firewall, responder, and etc. We'll say okay. Now my if we go to our traffic management, we'll go to load balancing. We'll go to servers. We'll add both these servers. We'll add. So my first server is web srv01. We have the IP address as 10.90. 10.90 is my first IP address, right? So this is my first IP address, and we'll click create. We'll add another web server, web srv02. Another IP address is 10.91. We'll revalidate it as 10.91. We'll click create, and it is done. Now we'll navigate to services. We'll add the service. So my service, I'm saying service 1, srv01. I'll select the existing service, and I'll select server 1 and protocol HTTP port 80. Okay, and we'll say done. Now my service is up. You can see my service is up. We'll click on add. We'll give the service 2. So there's my service 2 for server 2. We'll select existing server. We'll give the server 2 protocol HTTP port 80. Okay, done. And you can see my service is up. Both services are up. Now we'll go to VIP virtual server. We'll click on add. We'll give the service name. So I'm saying SVC VIP. We'll select protocol HTTP IP address. We have the VIP IP address. So this is my VIP IP address. I'm going to select IP address 10.1.70. We'll click OK, and we'll click continue. So we want to bind these services. So I'm going to select my both these services. So I'm having service 1, service 2. We'll select it. We'll click bind, and we'll click done. Now you can see my service IP is also up. So this is my private IP, and it has an associated IP address also. Right, so I need to browse it. So let's go to our, for example, I'll go to my web server 1. Let's connect to this web server 1, and I'm closing this. I'm going to launch 10.1.0.70. So this is my VIP, and you can see I'm able to launch it. I'm able to successfully launch it. It is working completely fine. My load balancing is working completely fine. So this is how we can configure load balancing in our Citrix gateway. Apart from that, you guys have seen the rest of practicals where we were having challenges for configuring content caching or GSLP. Now you can practice those labs also. Apparently, gradually, as and when I'll be getting the enough time, I'll keep on recording another videos, and it will be updated in the same location. Thank you. Meanwhile, thanks for watching the video.